It's that time of year again for the Locked On NFL mock draft. So what are the Raiders going to do at pick number 6? We'll talk about that, plus a lot more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 25th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day. I let you know that each and every day because that's real. That's because of your consistent support and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making us look good and sound good each and every day. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit him up. You can also hit me up at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, you know, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at for you, 707-654-4693. And you can imagine there's tons of feedback to get to. Plenty of calls, plenty of texts, plenty of things, all things draft. We'll do that in segment number 3, get as much in as possible as we close out the show. Segment number 2, we're going to talk about that Locked On NFL mock draft. Anyone who's been around the show for a long time knows we do this each and every year as a network. Every single host from one of the Locked On NFL shows makes a selection for their team. So obviously the Raiders are picking at number 6. So what am I going to do? Well, I don't like to just do this by myself selfishly. I like to talk this thing out, right? So we'll talk it out before I ever make the selection, and we'll come to some kind of an agreement, or we'll try to come to some agreement. We know how that shakes out, and then obviously I'll turn in my pick at number 6. So I'll kind of go over what I can go over with you already and lay out the different scenarios that are in front of the Raiders at pick number 6, and then talk it out and see what I come up with at least today, and then we'll figure it out as I get ready to turn it in. But it'll be a lot of fun anyway, mock draft season. So that continues here on the Locked On Raiders podcast and the Locked On NFL podcast channel in general. We'll do that in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, including a little bit of roster news. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And I have to admit, I was pretty surprised on Monday afternoon when I found out that the Raiders did not, in fact, land linebacker Christian Ellis. That was something I was pretty adamant that I thought that the Raiders were going to get their guy. He was a restricted free agent by the Patriots. They had until Monday afternoon to match the offer sheet that the Raiders signed him to, and they did. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network tweeted out, "The Patriots have officially matched the Raiders' offer sheet to linebacker Christian Ellis. He's staying in New England." Big surprise, right? They had signed a couple linebackers. All their beat writers, for the most part, over the weekend were pretty adamant that he was going to be a member of the Raiders. And here they go, Mike Vrabel and company, and decide that they're going to hold on to their guy, Christian Ellis. Now, there could be multiple different reasons. I know Vinny Bonsignore has mentioned this. Tristan Kuhn on Twitter has mentioned this as well. There's a chance that maybe the Raiders will make a trade. Maybe that's why they re-signed him, is to make a trade eventually. And Tristan pointed out, think the Raiders will explore a trade for Christian Ellis. Similar situation to Ryan Bates with the Bears and Bills years back. Bears signed Bates as a restricted free agent. Bills matched, and the Bears traded a 5th rounder to Buffalo. Again, that was just a thought from Tristan Kuhn. I know my guy Vinny Bonsignore has floated that out there as well. I don't know how much you want to just continue to give up draft capital. And I know they haven't done a lot of that. They still have plenty of draft picks. They still have 9 after the trade for Geno Smith. But I don't know if you want to just go do that, especially in a draft where it's pretty deep in linebacker. And I know that these are rookies. It's going to take a while to get acclimated to the NFL. I don't know if you necessarily need to go and make a trade, but I threw that out there because it's clearly something that could, in fact, happen. I don't know if it will, but multiple people think that there's a chance that that's what could happen, and that's why the Patriots decided to match that offer. But I got to admit, I was really surprised that Christian Ellis was not going to be a member of the Silver and Black. But they did sign a defensive player on Monday, and that is their nose tackle now, Leki Fotu. Remember, he's the guy that we talked about like a week ago or so, visited with the Raiders and did not sign a deal. And I remember I said there was a couple reasons for that. Either he didn't like the offer that the Raiders were giving him and he wanted to explore. Maybe they were just kicking the tires, doing a little bit of fact-finding, and said that they would give him a call and let him know what's going on. And that very well could have been based off Christian Ellis. Like maybe they wanted to allocate a certain amount of money to that side of the ball, and Christian Ellis was going to be that guy. after the Patriots matched that offer, they decided to pick up the phone and call Leaky Fotu. So he's signing with the Raiders per source. Former 4th-round pick of the Cardinals, played last season with the Jets. That was also from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. So he's a nose tackle. He's been top 30 at defensive line run stop win rate twice in his career. Big dude, 6'5", 340. I mentioned before, he's from Oakland, has 92 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks in his career, including 5 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks in 2023. So the guy's been in the league for a while now. Again, he was drafted in the 4th round by the Cardinals. Was there for about 4 years and then played last year with the Jets. Did not have a good season, but more depth added to that defensive line, and continuing with the theme of what the Raiders done so far this free agency period, where they sign guys on the defensive side of the ball and not really paying attention to the offensive side. The only guy that they've signed so far as to date is Raheem Mostert, and clearly they made the trade as well for quarterback Geno Smith, and still haven't got that contract extension done. Something I talked about quite a bit on my radio show on Monday. I was like, man, I don't want to act like the sky is falling and panic, but I mean, it's double-digit days now since Geno Smith trade has been made official, and they still haven't signed him to an extension, or at least announced an extension. So just curious, and, we've had some conversation about that here on the podcast, so it kind of just makes me wonder, like, what's going on there? But we'll see. I'm sure that nothing's, too big is happening behind the scenes. They're probably, back and forth on some dollar amounts, or maybe even the structure of the contract amount. I'm sure it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But Leaky Fotu, the defensive lineman, is now part of the Silver and Black. And also, this is something I should have mentioned on Monday's show, and somehow I let it just kind of get by me. Over the weekend, the Raiders hired a game management specialist. This was something that was tweeted out by Seth Walder from ESPN. He said the Raiders hired Ryan Paganetti to the coaching staff as head coach research specialist. His role will include game management. He was most recently with the Jaguars, director of football analytics, and previously worked for the Eagles, including when Raiders offensive coordinator Chip Kelly was there. Again, that's from Seth Walder from ESPN. And it's funny, got the tweet this morning from my guy Andy. He said, Q, just wondering if you were going to discuss Pagnetti's meeting and his hiring by the Raiders on your pod or on the show as the in-game decision-making, time management is something we all discussed multiple times last season. And Andy was on top of things. Clearly, I was not. So shout out to my man Andy. But yeah, you're right. Something that we talked about quite a bit. This is one of those analytics guys, one of the game management guys, one of the 4th downs, what do you do guys, right? Do you go? Do you punt, right? I mean, again, we know analytics is so major in all professional sports, all sports in general. I'm not an analytics guy. I talk about it all the time, but I know how much of a role that they do play. And so if you can get a good guy that's an in-game specialist, then that's great. And the thing about it, this is going to be the key for Paganetti. And I haven't got a chance to talk to him. I started following him on Twitter. He followed me right back. So I'm going to try to reach out and maybe get a few minutes with him at some point. But now that he's a member of the Silver and Black, a lot of that things have to go through the Raiders and their PR department. But, they can do really well Monday through Saturday, right? When it's all practice and they're going through it in the facility, and then it gets to game time and they kind of freeze up. Right? You can't have that guy. You can't have the guy that freezes up or can't make the right decision in that moment. You've got to have a guy that's able to say, hey, this is the scenario. We've gone over this many times. 4th and 2 from this yard line. Boom. This is the decision. And oh, by the way, here's a really good play. Or maybe Chip Kelly has a handful of plays. The good thing about this, what makes me feel pretty good about this decision and this hiring, is the fact that he worked with Chip Kelly when he was in Philadelphia. So at least there's familiarity there. It's not like some brand new guy is trying to learn who Chip Kelly really is. So that's another hire. I think it's a good decision. I think every team should have their game management specialist. If they don't, again, analytics plays a big role. I'm a big eye test guy, but I do know the role that analytics plays in all of sports now, whether it's professional or collegiate or whatever the case may be. So that's just a little bit on Ryan Paganetti. And we'll get some from Seth Walder on what he believes Paganetti will bring to the table and who he is, as he was the guy that was on top of that for ESPN. And my final little nugget for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, little news and notes. I mentioned UNLV's Pro Day on Monday and that all 32 teams were going to have representatives there. Now, Cam Ward in Miami, they also had their Pro Day on Monday, but there was at least one scout from every team at UNLV's Pro Day. And I mentioned that, I don't remember the last time that much representation was at a Pro Day. I didn't find out until later on Monday. UNLV hasn't had a guy drafted, Raider Nation, rock with me here. Haven't had a guy drafted since 2010. That's many, 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 many moons ago, right? 2010 was a long time ago. I moved to Texas in 2010. Since then, I spent a decade there and moved back to the West Coast, and they haven't had a guy drafted yet. So that tells you how long it's been since they had a guy drafted. But this year will be different. Linebacker Jackson Woodard, I do believe he'll get drafted, and also wide receiver Ricky White III, I think he'll be drafted as well. It may be 4th, 5th, 6th round, whatever the case may be, but I do believe they'll hear their name called over the weekend of April 24th, I should say, through 26th, all 3 days, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. One of those days, those guys will hear their names called. But man, just hearing that they hadn't had a guy drafted since 2010 really helped you put everything in perspective, didn't it? Coming up in segment number 2, speaking of the draft, Locked On NFL mock draft season. We're putting it together again like we do each and every year. I'll lay out some scenarios of what the Raiders can do, what different direction I can pick for them to go in pick number 6. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the show, and that is FanDuel. And you know, March Madness is here. It's taking a little bit of a break until Thursday, at least for the men's game, but FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. And I know you're going to say, but Q, there is no Cinderella stories. I know. I get it. This is a year that there wasn't Cinderella stories, and some people think we'll never see those again because of NIL. I'm not that guy, but you know, again, it is what it is. They play the games out, and this is how they shake out. So you can pick favorites. You can go point spreads, totals, game props, whatever the case may be. You can do that. Any way for you to stay in on the action. Tournament games happening just about every single day, at least all weekend long. It's a lot of fun and exciting to bet on and be a part of. The FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So what do you have to do? Visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump into the Locked On NFL podcast, the mock draft, right? We do this each and every year here as a network. It's a lot of fun. All the hosts from the NFL. It's like a massive crossover edition, right? When we do the crossovers, it's just the opponents going up against each other. But here, it's all the different, the hosts of the different shows going back and forth, deciding what they want to do. In years past, I've actually made some trades and come out with some pretty good selections. This year doesn't feel like a year that I'm going to be making any trades, trying to move up or trying to move back. So the email came out, said, hey, start getting your thoughts together, start deciding who you think that your team is going to take at that spot. And obviously, you got to go in order of the draft. So you got the Titans at 1, Browns at 2, Giants at 3, Patriots at 4, Jaguars at 5, and Raiders at 6. So I can tell you right now, Cam Ward from Miami went number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. Tyler Rowland, he picked Cam Ward. Not a big surprise. I feel like that's kind of been set in stone ever since. Now, the Browns are currently on the clock, so they can go Shedeur Sanders, they can go Abdul Carter, they can go Travis Hunter, they could do whatever they want. But I'm just going to live in the world, and it's kind of going against my better judgment. I don't think that Shedeur is going to be a very good quarterback in Cleveland, but I'm just going to slide in Shedeur there at number 2 because he's a quarterback, and you know how that goes. So, again, this is just me picking at number 2. The only one that's actually been selected is Cam Ward, number 1, to the Tennessee Titans by Tyler Rowland. So then 3, you got the Giants. They can go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Let's just say they go Travis Hunter, right? You got him out there with Malik Neighbors. He's a fantastic wide receiver. And obviously Travis Hunter could play corner as well. Then at 4, you got the Patriots. And I'm just going to assume that they go Abdul Carter because they don't need a quarterback. So that's the first 4 off the board. And again, the last 3 are just me popping off the top of my head what I think happens. Then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars who can really muck it up for the Raiders at number 6. They have so many different options that they can go. They can go Jalen Walker, the edge out of Georgia. They can go Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. They can go Armand Membu, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. They can go Kyle Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. They can go Will Campbell, offensive tackle out of LSU. Tyler Warren. I knew that didn't say Kyle. I was like, man, Kyle doesn't sound right. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. They can go him or Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU. I think all those are on the table. Mason Graham is the one that, for the most part, everybody's been kind of mocking there at number 5 to Jacksonville. That would obviously affect the Raiders because I'll tell you right now, if Mason Graham is there available at number 6, I would be very, very tempted to go turn in that card and make my selection and say, yeah, the Raiders are taking Mason Graham at 6, only because of what kind of player he could be. You line him up next to Christian Wilkins. You have Adam Butler. You have all this different depth there along the defensive line. Your strength is even stronger. But let's just say, for the sake of this argument, that the consensus is Graham's going to go 5 to Jacksonville. So let's take him off the board for the Silver and Black. So realistically, what do we see in play for the Raiders? Ashton Jeanty, obviously the running back out of Boise State. That's who everybody's been selecting. You could say Jalen Walker, the edge out of Georgia. Since he didn't go 5 to Jacksonville, I say that he's a guy that could be in play, even though Malcolm Kuntz is back. So I don't really think that there's a big need for Jalen Walker there at number 5, but I guess you can never have enough edge rushers. Armand Membu, offensive tackle out of Missouri, definitely could be a guy that could be in play. Jahad Campbell is an interesting one. The linebacker out of Alabama. You know how I feel about Alabama players if you've been around for a while. But I'm curious about him because he showed up to pro day with his arm in a sling. So I thought that he had shoulder surgery, and I remember when I did the conversation with Ryan C. Fowler, who covers Alabama there in Tuscaloosa, he said that it looked like it was his hand. Some people are speculating it was his shoulder. No one really understood why his arm was in a sling or what he had worked on, but clearly he had something worked on and didn't participate in the pro day. So I'm interested to see what that is and how long will that set him back. But he's a guy that many people look at as a top 10 pick. So I'll throw him in there because the Raiders in their linebacking room is kind of a big question right now. Right? I mean, you got E-Rob right there. He's on a 1-year deal. You didn't get your guy that you thought you were going to get from New England. So, you don't know what you're really going to do at the linebacker spot. So that's a position that I could see could be up in the air. T-Mac, Teteroa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, I think he could be in play. So all those are realistic as far as I'm concerned, realistic options for the Raiders at number 6. What makes the most sense? Right? Do you want the immediate playmaker and Ashton Jeanty, a guy that's going to be ranked really high on most people's boards? I think Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah has him like listed 3 or 4 as far as the just best player, pure player when it comes to the draft. You can go with that. You can go with the offensive tackle, and whoever the running back is and the quarterback are protected a lot better. Make that offensive line 100% better than, or not 100% better, but a lot better than it is right now. Just knowing that that guy could end up being a big-time offensive lineman for the next 10 to 12 years, do it in the same vein as what the Chargers did when they went out there and got Joe Alt. Right? I mean, you got Rashawn Slater on one side, and then you got Joe Alt on the other, and you've got stellar bookends that are going to help any run game. It's going to help any quarterback. So the Raiders could go in that direction with Membu. And then, as I mentioned, Campbell and McMillan, they still haven't addressed the wide receiver. Hell, they haven't addressed anything on the offensive side of things outside of the trade for Geno Smith and the signing of Raheem Mostert to a 1-year deal. So they haven't really done anything offensively. So I guess my better gut feeling tells me that they're probably going to lean heavily on the offensive side of things. Not necessarily saying every pick is going to be on the offensive side, but since they haven't done anything in free agency, really, when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, I feel like that's where the lean is going to be in this year's draft. So, I feel like with linebacker, similar to running back, it's a deeper draft. Campbell's probably the best linebacker in this draft, but it's a deeper draft when it comes to linebackers. So I think that they may address that a little bit later. All the research I've done on Pete Carroll and, kind of what his approach has been whenever he was, putting Seattle together, just kind of who he is as a, talent evaluator and a builder, Bob the Builder. Feel like the big time explosive playmaker is the direction that they go. It makes sense why everyone has mocked Ashton Jeanty at number 6, but I'm still kind of torn. Do you go Jeanty? Do you go Membu? Or do you go McMillan? That's what I'm really kind of stuck with those 3 right now. Those are really the 3 options that I'm looking at. Jeanty, Membu, the offensive tackle out of Missouri, and T-Mac, the wide receiver out of Arizona. And I know a lot of people have T-Mac going around 20th. So maybe that's a trade back type scenario, and then you go get your guy. But then again, you run the risk of missing out on your guy. So the running backs and linebackers are pretty deep. So do you go in that position? And I know a lot of people say it's a no-brainer. Why overthink it? Just go get Ashton Jeanty, and I understand that completely. But I want to make sure if I'm going to be the one on the spot, if I'm going to be the one making the call, that I get the best value, I get the best player at that position, at that time in the draft where it's going to benefit the Raiders for the long haul, right? I mean, Ashton Jeanty obviously can build them up right away, and if Membu is really good, he can too. right? Just from a different style. One thing I heard on Monday from Bucky Brooks, he was on Raiders.com talking about the draft, and he said if you're drafting in the top 10, you want to draft a guy who could be a perennial Pro Bowler every year. When they start handing out awards, you want to get a guy that you feel like could be in that conversation for a Pro Bowler every year. Ashton Genty, check that box. Membu, the offensive tackle, check that box. And, of course, McMillan, T-Mac from wide receiver from Arizona, check that box. I feel like all three of those guys check that box. Those, to me, are the three biggest options and realistic options for the Raiders at number 6. So, as I said, I have not made my selection yet. I want to make my selection sooner rather than later. Obviously, I'm waiting for the Jaguars to make theirs at number 5. This thing's got to get rolling. You got the Browns, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Jaguars in front of us. So far, Cam Ward's been the only one selected for the Tennessee Titans by Tyler Rowland. So we got a little bit of time. You can give me your feedback, 707-654-4693. You could tweet at Ari Produces. You could tweet at me at your boy Q254. What do you do? If those are the three options, those are the three realistic options, Genty, Membu, or McMillan, where are you going? And if you have someone else that you believe is a realistic option, feel free to let me know those thoughts as well. But you got to get them in quick, fast, and in a hurry because I got to make my pick pretty soon as we put this whole thing together on the Locked On NFL Podcast Network. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Again, 707-654-4693. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Don't forget, man, get your calls and texts and get your feedback in on the mock draft because I got to get some answers. I got to come up with the right pick sooner rather than later. But we'll start things off. Chef Raider, he's calling to send a special message to Raven, who let us know about the loss of his wife on Monday's show. Here he is, Chef Raider.
What's going on, Q? What's going on, Raider Nation? It's your boy, Chef Raider. Hey, I was just listening to Monday show, and I just wanted to give a special shout out to Raven. My heart goes out to you, brother. My condolences to you and your family. God bless you, man. Thank you for trusting us to share that information with. And personally, as someone who lost their mother, just a few months ago, I most certainly don't take advice like that lightly, and he's absolutely right. You never know when the last time you're going to have a chance to tell somebody that you love them. So, whatever you're going through, you know what I'm saying, attitudes, fights, old beef, you know what I mean, whatever it is, let it go. Life's too short. Love your loved ones. Hold on to them, and you let them know every single day, you know what I mean, that, you love them. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional because, that just touched me. That just touched me in my heart, man. Like, I feel for you. And, God bless you and your family and, Raider Nation's family. So first and foremost, you know what I mean? Like, I want everybody, anybody who's hearing this, you know what I mean? Like, let's all give a shout out to Raven and his family. Let them know that we're thinking about him. All right? All right, Raider Nation. Love y'all. Peace.
Chef Raider, thanks so much for the call. And yeah, I echo your words 100%. That's why I wanted to make sure to get that text in on Monday because that was a big deal, right? Raven did trust us as a family here on the Locked On Raiders podcast with that kind of information. It's obviously way bigger than football, but football in this show is what we can turn to when we are going through some stuff, right? And believe me, I'm living proof, and I know a lot of us are as well. A lot of times you don't know what, this show or others like this mean to people, and so many people have told me stories, whether that's at the Torch, at the game, whatever the case may be, wherever I'm at, I've learned a lot about what this show means to people outside of just talking about the Raiders and talking about football. So that's why I definitely wanted to make sure to get that message on from Raven. And Chef Raider, I think that's a fantastic follow-up. Thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from 60s era Raider. It says, hey, Q, as a many decades Raider fan, I just want to give you and most of the younger analysts on the scene now, I have learned so much from you guys as to the draft and future roster moves. I'd love to see the old Raider model of a punishing ground game and a deep passing game. I think you can still work with some tweaks. Thanks for all that you do. That's 60 eras Raider, and thanks so much for the text and the compliments. We definitely appreciate you. And yeah, man, I think that it's funny. Everything we've been hearing about Pete Carroll, it sounds like what he wants to do is very old school Raiders like, right? The bump and run as far as press man coverage. That gets me excited, right? Being able to stretch the field. Geno Smith has a heck of an arm. I think his arm is very underrated. I don't think people realize how strong of an arm he has and that he can throw that bad boy really deep. What that dude was doing at West Virginia, and I know that was many years ago, he was stretching that field in a major way, right? So maybe now you can start to see, you can start to see the Raiders get deep and have more explosive plays with that arm strength that Geno Smith has. So it's something. We'll see what they do. We'll see if they end up going with a big explosive running back like a Ashton Genty, soften up the defense, suck them up, and then all of a sudden, boom, hit him over the top to like Trey Tucker deep or anybody else that they might bring in for the deep ball. T-Mac can go up and get that 50-50 ball. There's a few guys out there like a Luther Burden. He's a guy, Matthew Golden. Those are a couple other wide receivers that the Raiders can address that position a little bit later on that can go get that 50-50 ball as well. That could be an option the way that they go. Obviously, we know what they have in Brock Bowers, and Trey Tucker's got the speed. So there's a chance it might not look exactly like the 60s era when it comes to the Raiders and when they were at their glory, when they were throwing the ball deep and, they were just bigger, faster, stronger, tougher and all that. It might not look exactly like that, but I think there's going to be some shades of it that you're going to recognize and I feel pretty good about. So thanks so much for that text. I definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Georgie. He's calling to talk about the draft and what he thinks that the Raiders should do, and he's going to break it down a few rounds deep. Here he is, Raider Georgie.
Hi, Q. This is Raider Georgie. I would like to thank you for being gracious, talking to me as you were driving off in Costa Mesa from the secret camp last year. I was the guy on the side of the road as you were driving off. You kind of gave me your take, and you were kind of honest. I appreciate it. I want to just give you my take on the draft where I'd be happy about it. First round, I take Armand Membu. We just got to show up the line regardless of all the hype on our running backs and so on. The second round, I take whoever fell, Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant. Derek Harmon reminds me of the defensive tackle from Kansas City. Same size, height, speed, strength. Third round, I take Arante Ursary. He was the only one that controlled Abdul Carter last year as Minnesota played Penn State. In the fourth round, I take whatever running back falls. I think the top ones would have already been gone by now, but I think like R.J. Harvey, Scadaboo, Bashul Tootin, those kind of guys that, showed great speed, like around 5'8", 5'9", 205 pound backs, are what Pete Carroll needs. And then the fifth round, I take whatever QB fell. I think this is really attainable for the Raiders. If they did this, I think it would be a great draft. Well, thank you, Q, again, and take care. And I will be hopefully maybe seeing you another time at another one of the practices. Thank you so much. Out.
Raider Georgie, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. Thanks for the shout out, though, from Costa Mesa as well. It's funny. You won't believe it, but I do remember that interaction with you. And I remember talking to a bunch of fans following the practices there in Costa Mesa. Obviously, there wasn't a whole lot there, but I do remember you in particular because I was about to drive off and head back to the Airbnb and get ready for the radio show. And you started talking to me about the team. And I remember chopping it up for a little while. So that was really cool. I'm glad you remember that. And I'm glad that, it meant something to you as well. So definitely appreciate that. You talked about a few guys. Armand Membu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. We talked a lot about him. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan. And Ariante Ursary, offensive tackle. And then you also brought up the running back and quarterback position as well. So, there you go, man. That's kind of on the same lines of what we've been talking about when it comes to offensive linemen. It might not be those exact guys, but I think the recipe is there. Right, you go get a big-time offensive tackle, and that's why I put Membu in particular in the scenarios for the pick number 6, the 3 realistic scenarios that I thought are in place. The 2 defensive tackles that you're talking about, Harmon and Grant, those dudes can be those guys could be somebody. And Ursary out of Minnesota, big dude, right? Big dude, 6'6", 330. Big dude. He was up and down, though. I remember he was up and down throughout the course of the year, but he had a really good game against Penn State, as you mentioned. He caught a lot of people's attention out of that game going up against Abdul Carter, who obviously is going to be a top pick in this year's upcoming draft. Running back is deep. Quarterback is always going to be a question, right? Charles Davis, I had him on my radio show on Monday. Really good stuff. I should bring some of it to the table here on the podcast. And as soon as I said that the Raiders went and got Geno Smith, what should they do at 6? He was like, man, go get the runner. Go get the runner. I didn't even get it out. Get the runner. Go get the runner. Go get the runner, right? Go get Ashton Genty. He can go with Geno Smith, and all of a sudden the Raiders could be in a really good position. So, again, a lot of the consensus is just go get the running back and make it happen and have a blue-chip player there on your roster. So I like how you're thinking, though. You're talking offensive line, defense, and more offensive line, and then obviously the running back and the quarterback, and whatever else the Raiders choose to do. But it's a really good breakdown, man. So thanks so much for that. Do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Kai in San Jose, California. It says, hey, Q, listen to your podcast on Thursday, and I agree with you 100%. I think our offensive line definitely needs somebody that will come in and solidify the group of 5 in order for that group to have continuity, which is something so important for our O-line. I got 2 questions for you. 1, do you see the Raiders being in line to draft an offensive lineman at 6? 2, if you're sitting in the Raiders GM chair, who are you drafting round 1, round 2, and round 3? Keep it the good work, Q. Go Raiders. Kai, good text. 1, I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do at 6, let alone the second round and the third round. I'll say this. Offensive tackle at 6 would not be a bad pick, in my opinion. I know it's not a blue chip, sexy player. No one's going out to get a Membu jersey if they go and draft that guy, but he can have the same kind of impact as a big-time player like an Ashton Genty, just in a different way. I would have no problem with that. I do think in the second or third round, they do need to address the quarterback position. I don't think you need to get caught without a quarterback. Geno Smith is not going to be the quarterback of the future. He's the quarterback for right now, right? So I think that you do need to have someone that you feel comfortable that you can develop behind them. If that's a Milroe, that's a Milroe. If that's a Dylan Gabriel, that's a Gabriel. If it's a Will Howard, right? Tyler Shook. I mean, whatever the case may be, whoever you think that guy could be, you need to make sure that you do that. So I think within the first 3 picks, you'll see a quarterback selected probably round 3, right? Especially if like a Jalen Milroe still there in round 3, I think that they can go, offensive tackle or running back or wide receiver at number 6, like I mentioned before. Round 2, what they don't get, they can address there. So if they go running back, they can address offensive tackle if the guy is there, if they feel comfortable with that guy. If they go offensive tackle, they can go running back in round 2 or something, or a wide receiver, whatever the case may be. I feel like that they can mix and match what they need to do, but there's a few options that they have for sure. So thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And make sure you get in on the feedback as well. 707-365-92. No, that's 70. Now I just combined too many numbers. I just combined this number and the phone number for the radio station. Now that's when you know you're doing too much. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail. Like someone's going to call that number. It's going to be some weird person answering and be like, who's this? Oh, I'm trying to call Q. Who's Q? I don't know no Q. Like, man, I was about to have a problem for you, right? I was about to set you up for failure. So I apologize for that. Again, 707-654-4693. Got a call from Hogan High Raider. He's calling to talk about the new staff that's in place for the Raiders, led by GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll. Here he is, Hogan High Raider.
What's going on, Q? This is Hogan High Raider 96, calling all the way from Manteca via Vallejo. Valley Joe. Just want to talk about the new regime in play. I got cut off on my last call. I went a little bit too long, so I'm going to keep it short and simple on this one. Things just feel different, man. It feels like we're moving in the right direction. I feel like they really have a good grasp on what to do. The past regimes have been kind of iffy. I haven't felt this way since Gruden 1.0. We were winning divisional seasons. We were winning playoff games, making it to the bowl, getting close to the bowl. It felt like consistency. It felt like we were managed right. And I got this feeling again. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, how you feel about the new regime and the direction that we're moving in, and I'll leave it at that. And I'll say, I don't know, man. I think he went to Vallejo, Q, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm gonna leave you with this. I'm gonna leave you with a Go Raiders, and I'm gonna leave you with a Go Spartans at the same time, my brother. All right, man.
Hogan High, thanks for the call, my man. Shout out to the Valley Joe. And no, I didn't go to Vallejo. at all. I do have family that live or lived in Vallejo for a long time. I think they still live there, but I'm not 100% sure. But I never went there. I went and hung out a few times back in the day, but that was it. I'm like a mod, right? Back in the day when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore. You know, you get that, right? Back in the day when like Great America was there, or not Great America, Marine World. Yeah, Marine World. The other Six Flags thing. Yeah, so Marine World was there. That's how long it's been. A very long time since I spent any time in the Valley, Joe. As far as the staff goes, man, it does feel like there's a sense of been there, done that, right? And I said that when Pete Carroll got hired, like some stability was there with the Raiders that they didn't have before, right? They had a lot of new, right? They had a new head coach, Josh McDaniels, and I get it, he had been a coach before, but we know how that shook out. Had a new GM in Dave Ziegler. Then they had Antonio Pierce, who provided a lot of excitement for Raider Nation. I got behind him. Obviously, that didn't work, but that was new. And then, of course, they had Tom Telesco, been there, done that as a GM. That didn't work out. I think Telesco was fine. He just became collateral damage. And so now you're getting a guy in Pete Carroll that's been there, done that, has got championships under his belt from Super Bowl to national championship. And John Spytek has been part of a championship winning team, organization, right? He's been part of multiple organizations. Matter of fact, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, and also Denver. So, I mean, he's been there, done that. Now, I don't want to get too excited until I see it, because we've been there, done that. We've been excited for multiple reasons from different staffs, and it just hasn't shaken out and played out the way that we wanted it to. So I kind of want to see how they put it all together. Obviously, this draft is going to be big because so far we've seen in free agency, outside of taking care of your own guy, Max Crosby, and also trading for Geno Smith, we haven't seen a whole lot. We haven't seen a lot of, oh, man, this is how this team is going to be built. So I just want to kind of see it all put together and then get a better idea. But it does feel like that they're at least making smart decisions. Like signing Max Crosby to that contract extension first was smart. So he didn't get caught up in the shuffle between Myles Garrett and, say, Jamar Chase and others. They didn't get caught up in that, right? They let off. They put the money out there. They set the bar, and then everybody else went above it. But they got that done quick. They didn't have to worry about the quarterback carousel. They went out and made the move for Geno Smith. So I think that those are good decisions. We talk about it all the time, serious, unserious, or for entertainment purposes only. The Cowboys, I put in that category, entertainment purposes only. They tell you what they're going to do. Jerry Jones tells you that he's going to go and chase the Super Bowl, and they don't do anything, right? They don't go sign the guys that they're supposed to. They don't even sign the guys that want to be there. It's really weird. They take their time. They drag their feet. So we just have fun with that and put that in the conversation and category of entertainment purposes only. Unserious is what the Raiders have been when they've made a bunch of decisions. It seemed like they tried to find a decision and hope that it worked. It was almost like Battleship football that Joe always calls it, right? A3. Oh, that hit. Great. Let's do it again. A4. Nope, that didn't hit. Okay. B5. Oh, that hit. All right. B6. No, that didn't hit. All right, let's try something. Like that's what it seemed like with the Raiders for a while. But just based off the decisions that they've made this offseason, as to me, seems like it's making sense, and they're trying everything they can to be and live in that serious category. So I think you're onto something. I just want to see how the plan unfolds and what the Raiders do, especially in this draft. So thanks so much for that call. It's good to hear from you. And we got one more. We'll take a text from Big Drew. What's up, Q? It's been a minute since I chimed in, but I'm still here every day. Want to say it's been a weird offseason or different, I should say. I know there's a plan in place, but I say weird because I'm not used to us dragging our feet this much, especially when we have so much money. What's the purpose? Why haven't we signed Geno? Why haven't we made a single splash move? We still have player contracts that we need to tend to, like Jacoby Myers, but why haven't we? I guess I don't need an answer, and technically all the contracts for players who are already Raiders can wait, including Geno. But every day goes by and the players keep getting plucked and we don't move. Just not what I'm used to. Not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I trust the process. It's just weird. All winter, we heard the Raiders are going to be very busy this offseason and to buckle our seatbelts. Well, that hasn't been true whatsoever. P.S. I'm team trade back and load up. At this point, we need all the draft picks we can get. We still have a lot of holes. I'm all for the compete aspect, but let's do something already. Anyway, appreciate what you do, bro. Big Drew out. Really lengthy text. Good stuff right there from Big Drew. And, yeah, I mean, they didn't get out there and they didn't go and make the big splashy moves like you mentioned. I mentioned before the biggest moves that they've made is re-signing Max Crosby, getting him under contract, making him happy, so there's no controversy leading into the draft. Like, well, Max doesn't have any guaranteed money. He might be a draft day trade. Like, you don't have to worry about that. That's great. The quarterback thing, they didn't have to go through that carousel, and they didn't have to go through the song and dance that the Steelers are going through with Aaron Rodgers. They're able just to kind of control their own little destiny. Now, I've said it before. I don't know what the holdup is on the Geno Smith extension. I thought it would have been done, announced. He would have met with the media by now. It could be as simple as money. It could be the structure of the contract, what they're trying to do. There's a lot of different things that it could be. We just don't know exactly what it is. So we'll find out sooner rather than later, but the deal is already done. So, I mean, I guess at the worst, he has to play this last year of his deal and then go from there. I don't know. I've had people tell me that maybe they'll wait till after the draft to make his extension to see what they do at the number 6 overall spot. I couldn't imagine it drags out another month, but maybe maybe there's that. I don't know. So I just think that they're trying to be very calculated. They're not trying to spend a whole lot of money on outside free agents. They're trying to take care of their own house, and they're trying to really build through the draft. Again, everything that we hear about Pete Carroll is that he does really well with younger players. So I think that truly is what they're trying to do. That's going to be the philosophy they try to live with. If you go back to Tampa Bay and see what they did after they won the Super Bowl, John Spytek and company turned that roster over really quickly from the oldest roster in the league to the youngest roster in the league, and had so many guys out there starting that were drafted players from that. So I think that there's an element of that as well. But that's what we got, and that's all we really know just from observing and watching and from being on the outside looking in. We'll start to learn these guys' tendencies as time goes on. Big Drew, thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. Got a call from Savannah Raider, a text from Raider LT. We'll get that in on tomorrow's show. We'll have more news and notes as well. Of course, we'll have plenty of conversation. And Raider Nation, again, I need your help on that mock draft. What am I doing at number 6? I gave you the options out there, who I believe are realistic options for the Raiders at number 6. Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State. Armand Membo, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. And T-Mac, Tedoroa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. Those are the 3 options that I believe are realistic. Let me know what you think. And if there's somebody that you believe is realistic that I didn't mention, please feel free to let me know. 707-654-4693. That is the correct phone number, I promise. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.